And welcome back to another episode of Unpacking Endpoint Management. And guess what? It's just Danny and I today, and a clean shaven Danny. Yeah, you're looking smooth, man. You're looking smooth, brother.
Thanks. Got itchy. Time to go.
Also, we don't have adult supervision today, so this is going to be quite interesting. The show is kind of going to be a little bit of a reflective show. Yes, we will talk about CMG, the Cloud Management Gateway, some answer your questions around it, especially costing and capacity planning. But at the same time, CMG brings up a lot of reminders and reflections over the last 3 years. One of the reasons that the Cloud Management Gateway became very popular initially was way back in March of 2020. Obviously, the world was drastically changing. There was a serious shift to remote work, a drastic one, not one that we had enough time. We didn't have any planning for it because no one expected it. And so a lot of our customers were looking for ways to and quickly facilitate remote management for their new remote workers who had just basically packed up their desktops and laptops and taken them home. And initially an option would be to leverage the VPN scenario, but obviously all those individual computers, cramming those VPN concentrators, that really wasn't a doable or scalable option for a lot of our customers. So Danny, came to the rescue, giving a lot of options for these customers because most of them were still leveraging Config Manager. We had a few on co-management, of course, but he came out with this wonderful article that has stood the test of time. The Big Three article on the tech community, really easy to get to. And it's been you've probably had to make a few tweaks here and there, but it's been an excellent living document. And in these 3 years, Danny, we've had numerous innovations around co-management and tenant attach and the Cloud Management Gateway. So here we are, man. Windows 11 is soon to be hitting its second birthday in release. I mean, we've had dozens of releases of ConfigMan over the last several years, optimized now for remote work. Where are we going, Danny? Are we still headed to the cloud? Those who aren't at the cloud yet? I mean,
yeah, no doubt. The cloud is still a destination, still a place customers should be striving to get to. I won't steal too much thunder. My predecessor, Rob York, actually birthed that Cloud Management Gateway, and I just kind of inherited it and helped push it along. Well, COVID actually really did that, and I just kind of gave customers the options. The article still stands today. If you're not looking at the cloud, you should be. If you're on-prem with Configuration Manager, Cloud Management Gateway is probably your next best option. But times have probably changed. Maybe your organization has had change your strategy from, hey, everybody work from home, to maybe bringing customers back or end users back to the office now. So you got probably even more options than you care to have, which means you have lots of daunting challenges when it comes to managing your devices, right? Whether it be on-prem, what about those devices coming back on-prem? You got lots of oddities going on.
Well, especially if some of our customers are working for corporations that have now mandated the hybrid work model where they insist that they come into the office at least 2 to 3 times a week. You need something that's going to be flexible, both on-prem and of course remote as well. Of course, this is, as always, it's an interactive show. It's designed to take your questions here in real time, and that means if you have questions, let's go ahead and put them in now on Tech Community. We're also broadcasting, I believe, on Twitter as well, and I think we're also broadcasting on LinkedIn as well. So we had a question that's come in right now. This is a softball. Why would I use a cloud management gateway instead of internet-based client management?
Yeah, this is a real good softball. Yeah, IBCM. Internet. Did I even say that right? Internet-based client. Yeah. Okay. All the acronyms get mixed up. Yeah. So
that's your previous career. That's your
yeah, definitely. So yeah, I would say you don't want to use IBCM because why would you want to manage all that infrastructure? Like,
exactly.
I don't get me wrong, I've done so many implementations and whiteboard sessions. There's probably some old ones you could probably even still find on the internet, God forbid. But yeah, that's too much infrastructure to really manage, maintain, all to still have to be accountable for all of it. So I think about all those diagrams I drew, ports needing to access in and out. We aren't really investing in the internet-based client management solution. Like, it's still there, it's still functional, it's still supported, but all of our efforts are really focused on cloud. So I would say, one, because it's our strategic direction to help you be better. Two, don't take on all that infrastructure. That still costs. Yes, you can say it's not going to cost me anything to make a VM. It's not going to cost me anything, but it's costing you time. Your time is money. That still is something you're going to have to put SLAs around, have to build redundancy if you're truly going to like try to do something high availability. Then you won't have to build one, you'll have to build two. You have to put monitoring. Like, there's so much extra cost that you don't see until after the fact. It just doesn't really make sense. Make us be accountable, right? So that's kind of what we did. We allowed you to build a VM in the cloud. We gave you rules. We gave you access. We gave you quite a few things to be successful and be able to do the connectivity from out of the world into your organization and still be secure. So we all are accountable for maintaining that infrastructure for you. So you should hold us accountable. You should use that as much as you can where it makes sense.
Well, also, the concept of internet-based client management was born in a different time. Long before we had mature Azure services, long before Microsoft 365. I mean, it's almost like you're going back in time. There's no reason to be setting up on-premises servers to be internet-facing. That's even if you have them locked down, it's just you're increasing your attack surface there. And it's just so much easier, manageable, and scalable leveraging PaaS services in the cloud for sure. Speaking of PaaS services, CMG over the last period as well, evolved itself, had some transitions. We moved from the Azure Classic VM-based CMG over to the new one, starting to leverage virtual machine scale sets. And this is a great timing because we have a question coming in from Benjamin. How big of a project is transitioning an Azure Classic VM-based CMG over to the new Azure VM management? Or what are your thoughts there or recommendations there?
So we built something inside Configuration Manager to do that transformation for you. I want to say it's not. I want to say it's pretty trivial. In the beginning, it probably wasn't because there were some checks and balances that we probably missed, and I'm sure one or two customers or a few had some issues. But underlyingly, we basically saved the storage because remember, your storage is actually something else, especially if you're familiar with cloud. So if you've uploaded, several terabytes to your CMG storage, we didn't want you to have to re-upload that data. So it basically created you a VM, connected that VM to the storage, but those are two different entities, right? So you could actually drop the VM, rebuild the VM, connect it to your storage, and be, back together again. So that's essentially what we did. I guess if you looked at the logs, you could see all of that traffic, how we create, then delete, then actually reconnect your storage. So I say it's trivial. It was a good bit of engineering work for the team to do. Very glad they did it. For the customer, we wanted it to be easy, something simple. I don't remember how much we updated the monitoring of that transition, but when we did put this transition in a while back. We probably missed a few checks and balances when it came to monitoring, because customers always like, hey, what is it doing? How is it doing? And you'd have to go look at your Azure logs for that. But the transition shouldn't really be that difficult for you as a customer, especially now that it's been out, man, at least 2 years now. So the transition from one to the other should be pretty trivial for you as an end user.
Excellent. Another question came in. I'm new to this. What are the prereqs for setting up CMG?
Oh, that's a good one. Man, I wrote a whole CMG doco like a very long time ago. You definitely need, well, I'll tell you the way I would tell you to set it up kind of from scratch. What I would do is go find me a wildcard cert or a specific name cert. Get your cert first, basically, is what I would do. Find out what name you want to use and then go get your certificate. Once you get your certificate, then things are a lot easier, because you could get stuck at creating a certificate area. So request you a wildcard or request you a CNAME cert from your DNS provider. I prefer using external certs, but it's totally up to you as a customer if you want to use internal certs. I will tell you I've had less challenges and less problems with the external cert. It's worked good. Not had any really issues with it. Besides remembering a dang thing needs to be renewed. Outside of that, I mean, prerequisites, Azure account. One of the really big ones was, at the time, you needed to be, at least I would tell customers, hey, you need to go find your the Azure admin, whoever's your global admin is. It's so much easier to do that. So we used to get a lot of questions about, hey, I need to know the specific rights to give to the person to then go sign in and create it. That got kind of difficult, because you got to remember the cloud talks to many different services. Earlier, I characterized how when you create the cloud service, you're creating a VM and the storage, right? So you need different roles and permissions inside the cloud services. So there was a doc at one point where we published, I think it was Intune Service Admin, I think Azure Service Admin. But there was a few things you could do, but I would just say go find the global admin. It's not something that's going to be stored directly in your configuration either. So you only need the credentials one time so that the services can be created and created correctly. There's a lot of interacting services. So the easiest thing to do is global admin. If you really, really need to narrow it down to who creates all these different things, there's a link to our documentation, and then you could slice it up. But I tell you, it always winds up with questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas, or something does not work.
I know.
So global admin is the bulletproof way.
You're right. It is a serious tenant-wide operation, and I remember that document you're talking about. It's a setup checklist, and I believe our producers have put that link in the crawl at the bottom there. But yes, because order of operations here is going to be very important. Not just all of the steps, but the order of the steps. And yeah, if you're, I use a wildcard cert in my lab as well. And of course, when we're doing testing and everything, it's just really easy to work with. When we're talking about a more infrastructure based scenario, especially for like a global organization or a complex organization, obviously they're going to want to leverage their own internal PKI structure, and it's going to require some cooperation and again some planning. It's going to be a heck of a lot easier and quicker than having to do it the old-fashioned way with IBCM. I got that right, from decades ago. But it's still going to require cooperation. It is a major tenant operation, and again, order of operations is going to be extremely important here. So, speaking of infrastructure, we are on LinkedIn. That's what I thought. We have a question from Jeff coming in on LinkedIn. Can you talk through CMG geolocation support? You only need one CMG, but you probably need more than one CMG connection point to support worldwide clients, right?
So this one we can spend a whole hour talking about this one, but I'll give kind of the quick high level. So if you're a global organization, yes. Do you want to have CMGs closest to the endpoints? Yeah. There's a little bit of a difference too. Try not to make this an hour. Um, so you get two different components, right? Again, kind of like I talked about earlier. You get your server component, which is your IIS pieces, and then you get your storage component, which is where your binaries are if you've done any
Yep.
uploading from the distribution point into the CMG. You want the binaries closest to your end users, right? Not necessarily the IIS. Yes, the IIS could have some latency, but the latency of 12, 13, 24K from, let's say, the farthest point of the world, maybe I'm just making this up, let's say it's Australia to the United States, the latency is going to be small for IIS. Your latency for your binaries is probably going to be the biggest pain point. So if we just kind of separate those two, the one you're probably more concerned about is binaries. So we'll take the IIS piece and say that's not a problem. Um, there's some things there, but I'm not going to peel that back. I'll be here for an hour. Storage wise, if you know how our scale units work, you probably shouldn't even be concerned about that either. But if you're wanting to geolocate for connectivity reasons, that may or may not be a good use of your time. If you're wanting to geolocate for like compliance and legal reasons or things like that, then that probably is a better use of your time. Because the way our scale units work global, you probably won't notice a latency between global services. Like at least typically we don't on the back end. They have the biggest problem is the last mile. I got a question about this quite a lot when I first came into engineering about 6 years ago in London with a customer, and it's always last mile. Back end scale units are usually pretty fast. I'll be a cheerleader and say very, very, very fast on the back end scale units of the Microsoft infrastructure. Last mile is always the pain. Once we actually got to go through your ISP and go through all the different gateways, that is where your pain will be. There is a FAQ related to Cloud Management Gateway, and I do know I put some stuff about the geolocation there. So I would suggest read that first, and then if you got questions, I'm easily reachable via Twitter or always hit me up. And if we need to peel back any of that conversation, we can. But that geolocation can get pretty detailed, and depending on how much energy and value you get out of it, it may or may not be worth that deep level. So check out that FAQ first, and then we can go from there.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a good fact. We have another question coming in from Benjamin. This time it's coming from the tech community page. For those leveraging Intune and Config Manager with co-management, at what level is a CMG required if all workloads are managed by Intune? So I assume at this point he's saying I've moved all the sliders over. I've switched all workloads over to Intune. I say, you won. All right, we did it.
So
yeah,
that's I wouldn't say it's tricky, but it's interesting, right? Because if you've moved all the sliders over, what is your what's the value of configuration manager for you? Because if you move managing all things via Intune, customers should aspire to be there. I really mean that. That's not me drinking the Kool-Aid and showering in it. I'm telling you, you should aspire and have some a goal to be all managed by the cloud. But what's the value of configuration manager would be my question to that customer to ask that question. I kind of know what the answer is. Again, I drink the Kool-Aid. I don't shower in it. So I kind of know what the answer is. But if you are let's see, if you're still using the config man agent after you've moved the sliders over, I would say you're probably doing it for hardware inventory, software inventory, other bare bones functionality of the configuration manager client.
Yeah, for me, if all your workloads have been moved over to Intune, it might be time to start looking at your own deprecation of Config Manager, especially because, there is a cost to CMG. Intune, you're licensed. And once the user's licensed, and you pay a flat fee. It's a fixed cost. But CMG, and we'll probably get into this. I'm sure we're going to get questions about this. There's going to be cost variances depending on several factors there. So I would say that unless you're leveraging that stuff you talked about, which is deep, really granular hardware and software inventory, it might be time to start moving on from Config Manager at that point. Another question. I want to make sure we get all the questions. This is good. This question's from Keith, and it's a troubleshooting question. All right, we're not. I'm quite removed from my support days, but we'll take a stab at it here. From the client on the internet, what is the best way to test connectivity to all required endpoints, URLs, service points needed? Is there a script to show URLs are accessible? There's some history behind this. They had CMG for a while, and proxies and firewalls were preventing full functionality due to this problem, I would imagine. Now policies are getting to the devices, but not all applications, software updates, Windows Update contents are not necessarily downloading, to the client. One thing I'll speak of is, CMG, of course, has several partner services that also may not be necessarily configured properly as well. We deal with this a lot in the Intune world because Intune relies on so many additional partner services, not just on the Microsoft side, but also on the Google side, also on the Apple side. And within Microsoft, there's Windows Update services, there's Azure AD services, there's global Microsoft 365 services, all on top of these specific Intune service endpoints. So I would be thinking that this could be a number of many different possibilities here, but one common one could be you may have all the CMG specific ports and services configured properly, but some of the parallel stuff, I know this is not a problem in the past, but with applications, if you were leveraging like the Microsoft Store for Business, there would be some additional endpoints needed to be configured, as well as Windows Update as well. But what are your thoughts there, Danny?
I was trying to look it up real quick because I forgot the name of the log. But if you're telling me your policies are getting there, if you were to look at your CCM messaging log, that would tell you wouldn't see a lot of errors there. But so two things. First off, I was thinking when you're on-prem, there's a URL we used to be able to go to, still be able to go to check to see if your management point was functioning. So you would put a URL in your address bar to your management point, and you would see some I forgot what kind of page it was. It was a page that just said nothing really about it said nothing really, but it let you know that your communication to your management point got through. If you're doing that on CMG, then you would have to make sure the device has a cert because it's going to have to handshake, right? So you can actually see it. Other thing I was thinking, when you look at your logs, if you are getting policy, CCM messaging is probably going to be fine for you. You won't see a lot of stuff there, but I forgot the name of the log offhand, but there's a log that's going to be telling you about failures for the download. Because from what you read or what I heard you say was policies getting there, but applications aren't. So find the log that's referencing all those failures, and then that'll tell you where it's trying to go. You can figure out if it's whitelisted, not whitelisted. Most likely it's probably not listed as a endpoint that you can actually access. We'll see. Tell you where all the apps come from.
I'll get our producer to put in the we've got the excellent log file reference, which
you beat me to it. But yeah, that's what there is a log that will look at all of the download stuff, and you're probably getting failures in there. I don't remember what it is right off the top of my head, but what I heard is your device is getting policy, not getting applications. I won't say it's easy to troubleshoot. It's probably easy for me because I've been doing it forever. But CCM messaging is going to be clean. There's a download. All of your policies tell your device where and what apps to get. So there's a log somewhere that's telling you basically got red in it. There's a log full of red saying I can't access this URL or you're missing hashes or something like that.
Yep. And of course, one of the greatest tools of all time, trace32.exe.
Oh man,
You can't live without it in config man world.
everything.
Or CM trace, as some people call it. Danny, this is the last episode of the season. It's kind of monumental here. This is the end of it. I guess it's technically the end of our third season, quote unquote. But the first season was kind of a short one, and we tend to want to kind of forget about some of those episodes, especially the one with endpoint analytics and Zach, where my screen or my machine crashed in the middle of it, and I think when it crashed, my camera froze, and I had this really, really interesting expression on my face, and we were just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. It was fun, it was exciting, but we got some more production in, we got it refined, and so we now concluded our second full season. Maybe we should have done a clip show, like the old sitcom tropes where they have a clip show. We probably should. You know what? We should probably bank a clip show in case we have a bad month where we're too lazy to come up. I don't know. It's just a thought. But okay. So back to the show, though. Back to the show. We have a question from Edward. We are committed to SCCM, but are intrigued by Cloud Management Gateway to complement it. What are the minimum requirements, cost, egress, all of that? So yeah, let's talk about cost. I mean, that's kind of our one of our desired focuses today. We've got some great documentation on cost and cost estimation that we'll have our producers also put on the crawl as well. But Danny, what are your thoughts on cost and cost estimation?
My first kind of cynical response is it probably shouldn't matter what the cost is. Like, and again, I've been doing this forever, so excuse my cynicism, but no matter what the cost is, I guarantee you it's cheaper than you doing it yourself. Again, take it from somebody that's set up a ton of these before CMG. Yeah, those things can be interesting to set up. So, being more realistic now, the one thing that comes to mind, yes, we have documentation, as our producer just put on. There's a link for the documentation of the cost, but there is another tool. A little credit to Johan Aardwark, who made a while back a very good cost calculator for Cloud Management Gateway. He did a very good synopsis of what cost your Cloud Management Gateway would be. I don't have the link right now. I'll find it later and post it. But that documentation should give you a good sense of what it's going to cost. Think of really what your biggest cost is going to be: your storage, right? The storing of the data and the transferring of data. If I'm recall correctly, it's egress, not ingress, not egress. One of those. So your transmitting of data outside is what is going to be the biggest cost, as well as your storage. That's it.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you've got an Azure team and you're already leveraging Azure workloads, then you're probably going to do yourself a service and deduplicate effort by syncing with them, because they're going to know how to estimate. They're going to be leveraging the same Azure calculators that they leverage for other Azure cloud services. We're going to look at compute cost. The Azure cost calculator is perfect for that. As you said, we're going to be looking at the cost of an IP address, which is minimal, and then of course, as you said, Danny, the bandwidth and network cost. And I would say that bandwidth is probably the most significant variable that changes the cost of running CMG from one organization to another. But as you said, overall, Azure bandwidth is not expensive. customers only pay for egress or outbound data. Inbound data transfers into the Azure data center is free. So for CMG, you're gonna incur charges when clients are downloading policies. But again, it's not a lot of data. CMG transporting the client data back to the site, status messages, state messages, hardware and software inventory, software update, scan data. Um,
Bringing back lots of memories.
oh yeah. I mean, but you can estimate some of that with that as well. And once you estimate that for an individual device, it's just a matter of doing math.
There was, while you're talking about, there was a trick I'll mention. I say a trick. There is an option, at least I think it's still there, whenever you're deploying software updates, right? Because typically your security guys are going to say, hey, my software updates on these computers are out of date. There's an option to where I used to check a box during that wizard. I want to say it was at the very bottom somewhere throughout that wizard, where it would say if your device can't reach your distribution point, get the content from Windows Update. So I could approve a bunch of updates, right? Devices would get the policy. The device would be, at home VPN or just, somewhere in the world connected to the internet. And once it got the policy, it couldn't get the content from the distribution point because I wouldn't upload the content. Why am I paying for Windows Update content to be on my CMG? I just wouldn't put it there. So with the content not being there, the device would get it from Windows Update, effectively saving me some costs. So little trick there if you've not explored that at all. But that's how you can keep some of your costs down.
By the way, looks like Keith and Jeff have put up a link to Johan's calculator in the chat over on the tech community. So that's
good job. Thank you.
And yes, Johan article mentioned by Danny a few minutes back, for those of you listening, is HTTPS. I don't know why I say that. Never mind. aka.ms/CMG real world.
This is what happens without supervision.
Well, we still have producers helping us out here, but but we miss you, Rochelle, wherever you are. Get well soon. So here's a question from Nigel. Can we talk through exactly what requirements are needed to allow the config-man agent to deploy during ESP to an Azure AD only device? I guess they're talking about things like the Azure AD UBI processor autopilot. We are seeing various levels of success in our test tenant. We are keeping CMG/code management around to allow applications from both sources and to run a specific task sequence. Well,
this is actually interesting because there's a lot I could say here. All right, so let me try not to go on a soapbox here. It sounds like what they're doing is autopilot into code management. So if anybody's know what that is, it's one of the features I first worked on or first owned when I came in engineering, autopilot into code management. So what this is a feature where the SCCM agent will come down to your device through ESP. So when you enable this policy, your device, we will give you a bootstrap, which is MSI file, that will then you'll put in your command line for the CMG, and then we'll basically Microsoft gives you the bootstrap. You actually get all the binaries from your you get all of the binaries for your configuration manager agent from your CMG. So that being said, it seems like this customer is using that policy because they're getting the SCCM agent through ESP and on Azure AD devices. So very good. You're actually just doing Azure AD only devices. You're seeing various levels of success in the tenant. So what you should probably go look at is a blog I wrote a while back, a deep dive into autopilot into code management. There are some things that happen very sequentially and operationally through there. Once your device gets that policy, I'll kind of give a high level, but you definitely should go check out the blog. High level is if you're using Windows 10, your devices have a registry switch. The registry switch tells your device who owns the workloads for that device. By default in Windows 11, that value is set to Intune, which means you should use autopilot in the code management if you want to be able to control that registry. It's going to be set to a 0 or a 1. I think 1 is what is set to by default, and that means Intune is the owner of the workloads. If you install the SCCM agent, we could let you manage that key, or if you use autopilot in the code management, you could basically manage that policy and say, hey, I want config man to own the workloads, and then some of the workloads ownership will be coming from SCCM. So I'm not quite sure what you mean by inconsistency, like you're saying various levels of success. I'll put a little bit more detail. I'm happy to go into more detail about it if I do what you mean by various levels of success. What most likely is happening is that registry key is not getting flipped, or it is getting flipped, or your SCCM agent is continuously retrying. So if you look at your CCM setup log, you'll see a continuous retry, and then that's probably what's eating your lunch. So if that's not it, add some more detail. We'll talk about it a little bit more once I got some more detail. But that's really good that you are using it, because that's definitely trying to march towards the right direction, which is cloud. Last comment I'll say is I'm interested in what you're doing, because you're saying you're using it so that you can allow apps from both SCCM and Intune. So one of the hats that I wear is on the apps team when it comes to Intune. So I'm working when it comes to apps. So I'm intrigued on what's missing that's making you still use SCCM. Is it just the task sequence, or is it applications that you have other things for? So anyway, that's something we can talk about later, but I can talk about that for quite a while.
Yeah, it could just be they're doing it the old way, and there were some orchestration issues, which is one of the reasons why you came up with that feature.
Yep.
Management as well, was to solve the orchestration problems there. So, okay, we have another question coming in from Twitter. Why did you take away the classic option? It's hard gauging VM scale set cost. Really?
Yeah. So, very good question, and I'm not even sure if we even documented this, but we wind up. Let's say it was a compliance issue. I'm not going to go into all the weeds of it, but so remember, with Microsoft, we use services of services. So the platform we were using was going through some compliance upgrades and changes. So we had to inherit that and go through those same things, because again, we use services of services. If I remember correctly, the virtual machine scale set was a PaaS service. I mean, the whole CMG was a PaaS service. So because we used that platform and they were going through it, we just had to inherit them. So when they went through a compliance, we had to go through it also because we use them. So that's kind of why we had to go to virtual machine scale sets. I totally get your conundrum there. It's hard to gauge VM scale sets costs, but compliance will always help us do the right thing and stay in the right light. So it was a necessary evil.
That's true. You know, as I always said, who is the largest Azure customer? Intune. I mean, Intune is an Azure platform, a scalable cloud service, and I like we use services on services. Yes, we do. So another question from Twitter.
And I'm getting in trouble.
I get confused. The CDP, I guess they're talking about the old cloud distribution point, is deprecated. Is the CMG now the same as a CDP, cloud distribution point, or does it include CDP functionality? Yeah.
Answer is yes. We just merged them together. There was no need to let you to create more confusion, more infrastructure for customers to have multiple different CDPs, and then here's a CMG that only did IIS. So we basically just merged them together.
You know, it's funny because we finally got to a point where we've stopped hearing the config man is dead stuff that's been rambling on like the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And, you know, on the one hand, we have people talking about config man is dead, and then people move away from config man or have haven't really done any drastic changes with their config man environment for like 2 or 3 years. And then one day they're looking at the feature set and they look at all the things that have been developed in the last 2 to 3 years. So, how can you say something is dead when there's innovation constantly still coming, even to this day, which is always interesting, always amazing. But again, we're talking about, at the end of the day, multiple paradigms. You have there's always going to be probably a need for config man for some people, for some organizations.
Yeah, of course. I mean, think of your air gapped areas, right? Those 3-letter acronyms, whatever. Like there's just a natural fit for it in a lot of places. So no, configuration manager is not dead. It's still alive and kicking.
But one of the things we do every now and then is we see how can we reduce complications and toil reduction for our customers. And you're right. I mean, maintaining CDPs and CMG separately, complicates the cost factor, complicates the infrastructure planning, and all we're doing there is we're actually just simplifying things. So we have another question coming in. We hear all the time from customers, which is better for zero trust? Co-management, CMG, or internet-based client management? That's an interesting one. If an organization has a zero trust project going on, because you see this now, especially with the White House executive order from the last couple of years, zero trust became very popular, and a lot of people wanted to mandate that, sometimes without necessarily understanding the implications of it. But how would a config manager administrator who is involved in a quote unquote zero trust project manage that? Would they look for co-management, CMG, internet-based client management, or I'll throw in another one? Let's just move on everything to Intune only.
So I'm gonna give the classic Microsoft answer here, because it really just does depend. I and some people internally as well as externally probably will disagree, but I think that's really a conversation between you and your organization, right? Zero trust is more of a methodology. So when you start having those conversations internal, what works for you as an organization? Because I reflect when I was a customer, I can tell you I probably would go for IBCM or CMG first. IBCM more or less, but then CMG for sure, because of the Azure authentication, Azure AD authentication, the certificate. But then you depend on what your organization's standards are and operational procedures. Maybe co-management is. So you really it really just kind of depends. Like, that's more of an internal conversation. If you want my opinion, I'll tell you, see, it's going to be CMG, because I've seen a lot of customers implement that. Like when we were going back on prem, right? When customers were coming back from the pandemic and it was safe to go back on prem to work, there was a lot of customers that just went straight CMG. That helped with the Azure authentication. I am a hands down believer that Azure authentication is way better than LDAP authentication, because I can get more and secure more with the Azure AD stuff. So there's arguments to be made for all three, but I would tell you, if it were me, I would argue the fact of CMG. Because who's to say your intranet traffic is even safe? Make everybody go authenticate from the cloud, so, even if they're on the office.
We have enough. We have another question here. What type of Azure storage does CMG use, and can we change the type? Well, CMG uses LRS, or what we call Azure Locally Redundant Storage. The thing to point out is I would recommend, as Danny mentioned earlier, not to distribute update packages with Microsoft Update content to a content-enabled CMG. Because if you do distribute software update packages to your cloud content sources, you're going to incur some additional data egress and incur some additional storage costs. So I would definitely advise from that. But Danny, do you allow them to control the storage type? And why would they want to do that?
So we've gotten this question a few times escalated from support, and it really stems from customers that, let's say a customer has a cloud team or cloud security team, right? So the cloud security team will start looking at all their cloud infrastructure and start, we'll use hardening it, right? So something we used to do on-prem, you'd harden all your infrastructure, whether it be LDAP, SharePoint, Exchange, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll get these customers that have these cloud teams, cloud architect teams, and they'll want to go secure everything. So this goes back to kind of how when we build it, right, you put that username password into configuration manager and the CMG gets created. Remember, we're creating we're interacting with multiple cloud services, from the VM infrastructure to the network, the VM service to the network service to the storage service. All those things are getting configured on the fly. When you go change those, then things can go wrong. The way we set this up was already secure, and you got customers that want to add extra security. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm saying that when you go change those things, we don't test all the permutations. If we tested all the permutations, there would be no service. So we tested a secure and got it out into the public for you to use. And when you want to add the extra layer of security, we document that, hey, this might be out of support or best effort support, because there's so many things that everybody would want to change based off of whatever your operational standards are. So yes, can you go change? Yes. If you click on the button in the storage, you can absolutely go change that. Will that impact the operation and functionality of your service? Quite possibly. I've seen customers buy NIC cards or rename NIC cards and then call and say their cloud management gateway is busted. Yep, it's probably busted because we were talking to it through one set of configuration. You changed it in the that did not come back down to configuration manager, no, it won't. So because you go and poke at things to make it more secure, you could actually inadvertently break the service. So I would say, as the text says, as the documentation says, it's unsupported to change it. And you probably want to have a conversation with support. Go Wild West changing anything, or at least have a lab environment. Make sure that if you want to change these things and add more security, which most customers are doing. Nobody's actually clicking the buttons to just change it for the heck of it. Most customers are changing it because their security posture says or recommends they change it. But we are not going to test all those permutations. So if you want to dig those changes, I hope you got a lab environment to test it, make sure it works, and you be accountable for those changes. If you want to escalate those changes as recommendations that we do, like, by all means, go for it. We want to help you be more secure. Just remember, it's a global service, so we can't make it secure for company A and not consider, all the other companies that are using the service also. Anyway, that's long enough about that one.
That's good. So a little bit of housekeeping here. My producers would like me to let the public know that I am coming to you from the state of Texas, and that the hissing sound in the background is not a pit of snakes. So don't worry, everything's fine here. And it's not like the last show where there were cats fighting in the background either. So anyway, back to the show. We have another question coming in from Alex on the tech community. I hope you can assist. I have deployed a CMG using a public cert. All is well, but the primary site server will not connect via the CMG connection point. It shows disconnected. I'm able to test the net connection, appears fine, and resolves DNS to the right address. I added an internal and external CNAME for this. Enhanced HTTP is enabled. Site is running 2207 version. I tried to install the CMG connection point onto a different server, and it still shows disconnected.
I don't have that one because there's so many things I would say try. The best thing I can tell you is drop a support case. I don't even want to open up that can of worms. That, like, drop a support case. There's a few different things that you should be looking at, and it's almost like a if and statement, right? If this, go here. If there, go there. There's so much to unpack there.
Check on the service itself. Check, make sure something like a resource group wasn't renamed inadvertently by, as Danny said, sometimes somebody else that might have access on the Azure side might have poked at something. Make sure you don't have any subscription related issues as well. I mean, cover all the Azure bases too, not just necessarily the stuff on the on-prem side.
Yeah, I want to open up this can, but I don't. Like, just do a support case. Say, like, check your IIS first. Like, there's something with the connectivity, and you look at your CCM logs, and you'll find something there. I know you will. Well, you need to look at the CCM logs to get your IIS logs. Between those two, you will find the answer, and that's where I would start. I'm not mentioning other things because I won't stop. So just like check those two first, get those two ready, because even if you call support, they're going to ask you for those two. So check those first.
All right, another specific question from Twitter. Oddly, what is the average amount of bandwidth for a config manager client's regular operation through the CMG per monthly billing cycle? I would assume the state messages, policy, retrieval.
So this one we can't really answer. And we can't answer this one because, they're define average. Everybody's average is going to be different because what's your impact here? Hardware inventory, software inventory, policy, WSUS sync, all of those things that you have configured for your own environment may not be the defaults, right? So whenever default configuration, I used to tell customers would be 7 days, 7-day cycle of SCCM, where most of your things were set for like 7 days or 60 minutes. Like policy, I think was defaulted to 60 minutes. Hardware inventory, software inventory, 7 days. I think WSUS 7 days also by default. But once you start tinkering with client settings and start making adjustments to policy and then departments and then deploying it out to different collections, things get interesting. So I don't think I can answer what's the average. I think if you want that answer for your estate, then I would set up a bandwidth monitor after a default installed agent. So just deploy a device, deploy an agent. Go deploy a device, install the SCCM agent. Don't make any changes. Just monitor that with a bandwidth monitor. I used to use Ipswitch or SolarWinds or whatever other product you have. That would be your baseline. And now you can answer that question more accurately for you. An average is going to be difficult because everybody changes those things. As soon as SCCM is fully installed, they will go change hardware inventory, software inventory, client settings. They will make changes to all that stuff. But good question. Sorry, I can't really give you a hard answer on that one, though.
Here's a question that our CAT team and CXE teams in the field would like us to answer for everyone today. What are some considerations for CMG design around like global networks? I know we kind of talked about this earlier.
We talked about this earlier. The just be interesting again, going back to the storage being the main cost. So what customers always come to me about is latency. Hey, my CMG is in the United States and that latency is bad. We have to peel that back and figure out what that really means. What question are they asking? Are they asking about IIS or are they asking about the binaries? Binaries is different. It's going to be different latency than IIS. So when we look at IIS 12, 24K or whatever, I don't think anybody's really gonna lose anything over 24K of latency. But if we're talking about Office is coming from the United States all the way to Australia, that's a thing. I would say go look at, again, same answers, just so I can be consistent. Same answers before. Go look at the documentation of frequently asked questions we put there. There's some geo questions and answers there. Start there and then ping me Twitter or tech community. Happy to follow up. Or go look at the blog for the big three. That's where I would start to answer that question, just for the sake of consistency. And if anybody needs a one-on-one, again, I'm very easily reachable via Twitter, Discord, or what is it, tech community. Any of those, like, I'm pretty open and love talking to customers. So,
and again, don't forget the big three and the CMG checklist and the CMG docs, which we've been posting in the crawl at the bottom of the screen. So we're coming up here on time, Danny. Do you have any kind of final thoughts or recommended practices?
So I put everything, pretty much, like all of the thoughts I could put about this have been well thought and documented in the big three. I just read that if you got questions about how you get from point A to point B, or cloud enabling your configuration manager estate, go read that big three. Everybody should have a goal to be as much cloud as possible. Not for any reason, just why do you want all that infrastructure? Like, I guess some of the things I reflect when I was an IT director and system admin is, these are mine. I want to be able to touch them. Yeah, don't worry about that. You're gonna have so much more work and more valuable work when you start looking towards cloud enabling your estate. Whether it be co-management, CMG, tenant attach, if you're not doing any of those, just being honest, you're behind. You're behind, and you've chosen to be behind, and I don't think that's a good thing. Maybe you're strategically tied up, maybe your organization is tied up, but if you're not looking at the cloud, you're not advancing your career, your own skill set, and I don't think you're really helping your organization do better. There's no need in having all that infrastructure. Learn the cloud, be okay with the cloud, bring all the people that you need to bring on that journey with you, whether it be your security team, management team. Get the people on board, be the person to champion that initiative, because that is the right initiative, being cloud. And that's it. That's all I got.
Excellent. So again, this concludes this month's episode of Unpacking Endpoint Management, and as well, this concludes our season of Unpacking Endpoint Management. And we will, of course, not take a summer hiatus. We tend to follow the fiscal year here at Microsoft, so we'll be back next month with the season premiere of Unpacking Endpoint Management for 2023, 2024, and it's going to be a hot one. It's going to revisit a debate that doesn't seem to be going away and won't be going away anytime soon. Should you be hybrid AD joined, or should you be, I guess, is it still Azure AD joined, or is it intra AD joined?
I'm just sticking with Azure AD joined for now. I know that they got this new name, but I mean, let's just stay Azure AD.
Or fully cloud managed versus hybrid cloud managed is probably another good way of thinking about it.
I got a feeling I'm going to get in trouble next session.
It's going to be interesting, and we're going to be joined by fellow Texan Jason Sandys, a Microsoft employee with the Intune product team, and another person from our Intune product team, Susan Taylor. And of course, we have Danny and myself back, and I think we'll definitely need to have some adult supervision on that next call well.
I'm definitely going to get in trouble.
But once again, thank you very much. We've appreciated your continued enthusiasm over our show. And of course, we're always open for suggested topics. If there are any topics coming up this next season that you want us to dive into, please don't hesitate to volunteer those topics and suggest those topics. With that being said, this concludes our episode of Unpacking Endpoint Management. Thank you very much. For Danny Guillory and myself, goodbye.